Best ink bottles or inks for low levels. So what are some of the best ink bottles you can have for when your ink starts to get really low? Of course, I'll say kind of as a caveat, there are things that you can do to work around having low ink levels in your bottle and that don't really restrict you to certain things like that. So for one, if you have, a bottle that's about to run out and you really love the color and you get another of the exact same color, you can just pour what you have into the next bottle and then you can rock and roll and you don't really have to sweat it. If you're just kind of wanting to use it up and then you're going to switch on to something else, then okay, so that wouldn't be so much an option. Couple different things that you can do, one of which is, where's my ink syringe? I have my ink syringe here handy somewhere. You can use an ink syringe, which I am failing to find right at this moment. That's crazy, I always have an ink syringe handy. And of course, I don't have it. I say I always have it handy, but it's right here. Just fell out of my little drawer. Okay, ink syringe, super handy tool to have. You can use it to either syringe out and directly fill into your cartridge or your converter, or if you have a piston filling pen, you can fill directly into the chamber if you can remove the piston, or if you have, a nib that has fins on it, such as, the Aurora nibs here, you can do what's called the feed saturation method. You can drop a little bit onto the feed and then suck it in like that. So those are ways that you can kind of work around it. You can put some into an ink sample vial, and that makes it easier to fill, kind of down to the last drop, if you will, or much closer to the last drop. So those are all some techniques that you can do to get it kind of out of the bottle. But if you want to just talk straight up bottles, I can definitely get into that. So, I'll cover this stuff at the end here, just kind of forming my thoughts. In terms of actual bottles themselves, so there's kind of two different ways to go about this in terms of how the ink makers design their bottles. One is to either just have a general design where it's kind of a taller, narrower body on the bottle, something like Robert Oster, right? It's a very tall, very thin bottle, so your ink level is going to stay higher just in general. Really the issue that you're going to have with your fountain pen when you go to fill it, let me use this Edison pen as an example. When you're dipping it in there, you have to submerge the nib at least up to the grip to really get a good filling. So if you have a bottle that's very low and flat, it is going to have more of that ink kind of sitting in that bottom unusable part. So having a taller, skinnier bottle works really well. Another thing that ink companies do to work around that is to have a design where it has some kind of chamber or a little partition or something like that where it can catch ink in it and allow you to get the nib down in there and at least fill from there. So let me start out, with some of the taller, skinnier ones. So like there's Robert Oster like this. Diamine on their 30 ml bottles are kind of taller, skinnier like that as well. And then one that kind of like bridges in between the two, between the tall, skinny and the little separate chamber is Visconti. So they've got this big wide fat part on top and it gets much skinnier at the bottom. So you're going to get most of the ink is going to be very accessible. It's only when you're going to get down to here that it's going to get kind of tough, but they restrict it at the bottom, I think partly as aesthetics and partly as functionality. That makes it a little easier to do that. Some of the other bottles that I have that I think fill really well are ones that have kind of those separate kind of chambers like I was talking about. Like the Lamy bottles, for example, they're a little weird. They're long and flat and all that, but they have this part down on the bottom where your nib can actually go well down into it. So you're not going to easily be able to get the part that's sitting down here on this nub, but you'll be able to get most of the remaining part of the bottle into your pen, especially with the Lamy nibs, because the Lamy nibs are shorter than a lot of other nibs. For example, I'll show you the Lamy steel nib compared to, say, the Edison nib. So there's, it doesn't seem necessarily like a world of difference, but I mean, you're talking a decent amount of ink when the bottle that's this flat in terms of that nib height there. So filling at least Lamy pens, you're going to be able to get a really good portion of these out of there. Other inks that have that same kind of thing is Pilot Iroshizuku. You know, they're got the wider kind of bottle thing going on, but they have, you know, a dip down in the middle there. So your nib is able to get down further into it. That helps you to be able to get more of the ink level out of it. This is kind of an interesting bottle design, but Caran, their bottle is actually slanted. So it allows you to have your nib kind of at more of a tilt, which then can allow you to get a little bit more out of it. So I just thought that was interesting to note. It's not necessarily the most efficient of all of these. Montblanc with their, you know, their shoe design bottle. I don't sell this one, but I have it obviously in my possession. And theirs, once the ink level gets low, you tilt it back and it fills kind of this section over here near the opening. So that allows you to fill over there. So even if you used up most of the ink over here, it allows you to do it just by kind of doing that thing. So I think that's a really clever design. I can't imagine how much this bottle costs for them to make, but that's part of why you pay so much. Interesting thing about this ink, Waterman, is it's, you know, fairly conventional shape. It's just kind of, you know, it's angular and stuff, but it's more or less kind of a circle. But because it's flat on the sides, the bottle actually tips up. So I'm not zoomed out far enough for you to really see that. But you know, if you are using, you can use it like normal, but then when you get down towards the end, you can tip it. That way you can really get your nib down in there and get kind of towards the bottom. So that's a cool design on Waterman's part. And then another one, it would be remiss if I didn't mention Ackerman. And they have very unconventional bottle design, which is cool. And before you ask it, no, I cannot retail it because they are a smaller, you know, retailer like us, honestly, that have their own ink made, and they, you know, are not able to wholesale to us. So let's get that right out there. But I have a bottle, so I can show it to you. So this one has like the main chamber down in the bottom, and then it has another chamber up here, and it actually has a glass ball in here. So you tilt it, the ball falls down, and then you tilt it back up, the ball blocks it, and of course it's really full bottle. I haven't used a lot of this ink, so you can't see it super well, but all the ink is up here and it stays nice and full, and then the actual ink level down here is only about right here. So it allows you to fill kind of from this top section. So really clever design on their part. Super cool. I would love to sell your ink if you would let me. And then just some other mentions would be some, you know, smaller bottles that are kind of made for storing and filling ink that are just not the actual bottles that you're buying, but that could be good options for you. TWSBI has a couple of options. They have their Diamond 50 Inkwell, which can work really well, you know, with a couple of different methods in filling that one, or there's the VAC 20. So that's another option. There's the Visconti Traveling Inkwell, of course. That one works really well. That one's really easy for filling too. So that is kind of multi-purpose there. Fills without getting your grip section all inked up. And then there's the Ink Miser as well, which if you're using a Noodler's 3-ounce bottle, you can actually take and insert this directly into the bottle. And then when your ink is getting low, it has these slats cut into it, and you tip it upside down with this inside the bottle with the cap on, and it goes in here and it in the hole, and then it fills up this little chamber. So then you just kind of fill your nib from here. And then of course they have just kind of a standalone one as well if you want to kind of decant a little bit and then fill directly from the cup, not have it in there. So this is a more universal one. This is made to fit the Noodler's bottles, but a couple different options. They have it in clear now too. This is the black one, but some good options for you there.